It's Chris Watkin here, and I am with Russell Quirk, a man who needs no introduction, and he, over the next 10 minutes, is going to tell the UK estate agency his point of view of where we are in the UK property market. Russell, talk to me.
So, Chris, hello. Glad you're well, mate. I just think, we've gone through 7 weeks of this lockdown now as we sit here talking, and it just seems to me that we kind of should have expected, I suppose, the doom and gloom in the media that we're getting. And I guess I'll do the summary bit at the beginning, I suppose, is that, yes, transactions have been annihilated. And of course, there's no new business being done really over the last 5 or 6 weeks. We all know that. But I think there's a bunch of positives that I'll kind of set out, if you like, that to me characterise the true kind of spirit of the UK property market, and why I don't think we're going to see a property crash in price terms. Now, I'll qualify that. We obviously need to separate transactions and price. They're not the same thing. There's a relationship, obviously, because if you end up with no demand and low supply, prices drop, etc. But, I'll take you back to Brexit. So June 2016, you remember that certain very, very clever individuals, so-called, and experts, the likes of Mark Carney and George Osborne, said that if we voted to leave, and I'm not going to get political here, by the way, I'm just stating this as a matter of contextual fact, that the property market would crash and prices would drop by 18%. That is exactly what George Osborne said, not at Brexit, as in we're about to exit now, but he said that would happen if we left, if we voted to leave the EU. And actually, in the time between when he said that and the vote and now, property prices have gone up 8%. So, he was 26% wrong. So I think we should be very, very careful that we don't just automatically accept that so-called experts from even the Bank of England and Capital Economics and the Institute of this, that and the other, even the ONS, those that are talking about house prices in the next few months, we shouldn't necessarily believe that they literally have a crystal ball and can tell us, because often they are wrong. And as I say, I'll go through, I think, why there's a few reasons for that. And that is that, look, first of all, our market is fundamentally sound. If we've weathered the storm of Brexit and kind of come through that without prices dropping, albeit obviously London being slightly more affected than the rest of the UK, then I think we'll weather what I hope will end up being a few weeks, a few short months of disruption as a consequence of this horrible COVID thing. So we are fundamentally a nation of aspirational homeowners. It's a cultural thing, right? So we all want to buy a property, which is why we have such a high home ownership rate. But we also have other fundamentals around the cheapest money that this country has ever seen. So interest rates at bank rate level of 0.1%. You can fix a 3 or even a 5-year mortgage now at less than 2%. Less than 2%.
I've just been doing, landlords can borrow 5% at 1.6%. I mean, that's cheap as chips, isn't it?
Yeah, so people will be shouting at this now saying, oh, yeah, but you can't get the money. Well, that's not true. There are bundles of mortgage products up there right now. And actually, as we sit here over the last 2 weeks, I've been watching this really closely. Not only are there now more products than there were even 2 weeks ago, because of course, in the first 2 weeks of lockdown, people like Lloyds, they pulled products, they decided they weren't going to lend above 60% loan to value. That's changed in the last couple of weeks or so. So you've now got multiple lenders on buy-to-let doing 75% loan to value. You've got an abundance of first-time buyer mortgages at 2.5%-ish fixed, 95% loan to value. They exist. You've even had this week, the last 3 or 4 days, a whole bunch of lenders slashing their rates. People like the Nationwide. Why are lenders slashing rates in the middle of a crisis? I think because they anticipate that we're going to come out of it well, and as a consequence, they want to be the lender of choice insofar as those buyers that seek to buy. So I think, look, there are, I guess, considerations in terms of what makes house prices fall or not. So one is the availability of money. I think we've covered that. And the cost of money. I think we've covered that. The other is sentiment. And I think sentiment has got a big question mark over it, because frankly, if the mainstream media keeps slagging everything off and taking the extreme of every piece of news and trying to feed us as a nation how everything is even worse than it really is. And I don't just mean the property market, I mean generally.
I mean, you're in PR. They always love to tell you the bad news but they never like to tell you what the good news is.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't it funny that when, and look, this is a horrible subject to talk about, Chris, but when they were reporting deaths and deaths were up at 950 a day, they specifically mentioned deaths yesterday were 950. Now we're down to 250 deaths a day. They're not really mentioning it. What they now talk about is total deaths, because that sounds a scarier figure. So there is a skew, there is a spin, of course, and the likes of Beth Rigby and Lewis Goodall and Peston and so on, what they're all about, I'm afraid, and yeah, look, I say this as someone in PR, they're all about, clicks and comments and engagement. And fluffy news, kind of nonchalant news, isn't as scary and engaging as big, horrible, hairy, scary headlines. So anyway, so look, once we get over the sentiment thing, I think that'll make a significant difference, obviously, to people's appetite. But then the other thing interesting is unemployment. Every other recession that we've had has been characterised by huge unemployment. What we saw last week in the official numbers, so this is data talking, not just my opinion, the ONS said that they forecast there'd be about 172,000 extra unemployment claimants for the month of April. And actually the outturn, the actual, was 12,000. So it's significantly different. And the reason is that, yes, of course, I'm not saying people haven't been laid off. Of course they have. And it's horrible. It's tragic. But the furlough scheme, which today, as we speak, has just been extended to October, as you probably saw, the furlough scheme is working, not just in terms of keeping people in work, but it's also working in terms of paying 80% of salary. Now, I know that's not 100%. I get that. It's not ideal. But this is not like some other countries like the US that are probably going to see 20% unemployment. We sat there for a number of months with the lowest unemployment on record, about 4%. I suspect it doesn't get much higher than 7 or 8%, and then we'll recover from that. So for all of those reasons, and in terms of the numbers that we're seeing coming out of, the property software companies like Desres, Andy Solomon's Yondell and so on, we are seeing pent-up demand translating into more inquiries to agents and portals, booked viewings or anticipated booked viewings rocketing over the last few days. I think we're going to come out of this from a property price point of view, okay.
What about estate agents? Do you think the same amount of estate agents will be in business by Christmas with the low number of transactions?
So look, I can't remember what Knight Frank said. I think they thought we were going to lose about 400,000 transactions this year. The question is, how many of those get deferred and how many do we actually lose? The Stephen Hayter stuff, did you see Stephen Hayter's surveys in weeks 1, 2, 3 and 4 of lockdown? They were really compelling, I thought, that most agents reported that less than 10% of their stock fell through, ABO'd. So I think if a lot of that is deferred, agents will be okay. If there's a big chunk of transactions lost, then those agents that were just recovering out of Brexit, nice January, February, March, rough sales, I think that some are going to struggle for sure. And I think, and I know I would say this because everyone thinks I've got an axe to grind with them, but I think the most vulnerable, of course, have to be the big corporates, because they're the ones with the big fixed overheads on premises and cars and so on. They're the ones that I'm afraid aren't very agile. They're the ones that I've talked about over the last few weeks, not being very visible in terms of their leadership. Whereas independents, we all know, are pretty sharp and pretty agile. If you've got to pivot a little bit, you've got to do more lettings and sales, you've got to work from home all of a sudden, you've got to up your ante on remortgages in terms of your financial service operation. Whatever those tactics are to survive, independents are much, much, much better place to do that. So, I mean, look, I'm not going to mention names, and I'm not going to forecast that we're going to see a culling of estate agency offices in the next few weeks and months. But there's some of them, it's going to be really, really hard. And of course, some of the corporates have taken on loads of debt. Foxtons have taken on debt. Countrywide have taken on debt. I think there are some that are really going to struggle.
Well, thank you for your time today, Russell. I look forward to speaking to you very soon on other topics, which I hope people will find of interest.
Always a pleasure, mate. You stay safe. Take care.